If you feel like you need to take a break, like a sabbatical from your podcast and your business, what is the best way to approach it? What could happen to your business and your podcast when you do it? And also, what's going to happen to your audience? Well, I just came back from my own sabbatical, and so I've documented everything and took notes of everything that happened so that I could talk about it and provide you some enlightenment in case you're considering to do it yourself and kind of like explain what happened. If you're new here, hello, I'm Anna. I'm a podcast strategist, and I help small business owners and impact-driven entrepreneurs understand what kind of strategy they need to do in order to get to their business goals. One of the things that is very important to understand is exactly what capacity does the host have in order to execute on that strategy. One of those things includes going on vacation and taking a break. So I thought, you know what, let me take you from on the behind the scenes of all of this so that I can explain exactly what happened. And may it have included perhaps my podcast being on not one, but twice on the top 15 of 2 separate countries? Maybe, maybe not. I guess you'll have to find out. Maybe also my podcast got an insane amount of downloads and I had to delve exactly into why that happened. I guess you'll have to find out by listening in. All right, let's get into it. Okay, this episode of the Podcast Space is not so much about getting you unstuck, but definitely giving you a lot of awareness about exactly what is the best way to approach taking a sabbatical. Now, let me define what a sabbatical meant for me. I went on a sabbatical for 5 weeks. So my podcast is weekly, so I had to decide, do I want to create 5 weeks worth of content? Do I want to shift? Do I want to kind of stagger the content or just go away? And one of the benefits of really knowing your audience and understanding what they want from you is that these decisions are just way easier to make because I know what I want and I also know what my audience wants. What this means is that I know that my audience doesn't necessarily take a break in August. A lot of you actually replied to my Instagram stories and told me that you're going to be working through August. So that meant that you wanted more resources. And from my perspective, what I needed to think about is that, okay, from what I know I can provide, what is the best way to approach this? Should I just do replays? Should I stagger episodes? Should I do audio-only episodes? The last one is exactly what I did. So basically, I decided, okay, audio episodes are easier to edit, faster, and also you don't have to think about as many things. And so for me, it was really interesting because I looked into my capacity as a creator, and I love creating video content. I think is so much fun. But indeed, I felt way less tired after doing, 2 episodes back to back instead of just having to record just one. And, I did notice the difference. So basically, that's what I did. And in case you didn't know, I send out 2 newsletters a week. So basically, the Wednesday newsletter is just an RSS automation, which basically sends an email out whenever a new episode has been published. And then the Friday episode gets released again on a secondary newsletter that is more thought through. Like I think about exactly what I want to talk about, is more personal. And also there's a lot of resources that I add on to that newsletter. So my decision was, okay, I'm going to scale it back. So I'm just going to do 1 newsletter and it's going to be the automated one. And then basically the third element was social media. And so I decided, okay, I'm not going to release content 4 times, 5 times a week. I'm only going to be doing 3 times a week. In case you didn't know, I have a course that explains exactly how to do that. I've been doing that for years and I help clients do that. It's called Maximize Your Podcast Content, where it just makes the whole process effortless. So basically you understand what is the angle of that episode and how to promote it in ways that isn't just like, hey, new episode is out. Promise that it's fun. So I looked into exactly what I wanted to do. And so I decided that I wasn't going to engage on social media. And I was also going to be doing no email and set up an autoresponder. And one of the things that I was really curious about is that to try the post and ghost method. That is what most podcasters do. You may be doing that yourself. So basically, you schedule that week's episode and you just put it out. And you don't really engage with your community. Because of course I disabled my account and I didn't really touch it much. I wasn't commenting and I wasn't responding back. And so the post and ghost method is something that I actually talk about a lot because you cannot grow an audience when you don't reply back. And I was a little worried about that, how that was going to impact the engagement on my account. And it ended up happening that, yes, even though it started happening progressively, I definitely noticed that there was a decrease in reach and the kind of like the type of responses. Now, there was still some reach. It's just I just started noticing that my account started getting, I wouldn't say like downgraded, but pretty much like the reach of the content was starting to really get more and more limited. Because again, it makes sense. When you're not using a social media tool, you're not engaging it, you're just signaling to the platform, hey, I'm not really here. They want to have people that are using the platform. It just makes sense. So basically, do not recommend that. If I go on sabbatical again, I will definitely not be doing that. I'll just, disappear from the social media. I'll just say, hey, I'll be gone. Goodbye. I'll come back later, because that definitely hurt my reach. So I talked about Instagram. What happened to LinkedIn? That's not my secondary social media that I use. To be honest, LinkedIn really didn't get much of an impact. I continued to get a lot of engagement. And to be honest, I even got a lead from LinkedIn while I was away. So it doesn't mean that, because you're scheduling your content, things are not going to happen. In terms of scheduling content, I'm a big fan of content batching, which is when you create a lot of content in one sitting and just maybe you create 2 episodes back to back, or maybe 3, or you do social media creation to promote that podcast episode in one sitting. Basically, you're looking at it from the perspective of like focusing in one thing at a time and doing a lot of those tasks in one sitting. Now, I have not done batching for a while. These podcast episodes that I record, solo episodes, are recorded week to week, but I record a lot of podcast interviews after hours and just like throughout the year. So I do a mix, but I definitely felt that preparing for everything ahead of time just freed me from that concern of, maybe not having enough content or feeling like I needed some extra time. I felt like it was really freeing because I had not a worry in the world. So definitely will be going back into batching probably at least social media content so that I can focus and, continue to organize other things like maybe some fun live episodes maybe in the future. But just making sure that not all of the process of podcast promotion is just tied into the spur of the moment. So something else that is super exciting that happened while I was away was the publishing of an article that I collaborated with Captivate, which is a podcast hosting platform. It's actually where I host my own podcast. If you want an affiliate link, I'll make sure that I'll include that in the show notes too. Now, I talked about how to analyze your analytics, your data for your podcast downloads, and understand a little bit of how to maximize the data that you have in order to make decisions about your show. So unfortunately, I didn't really get to promote that in real time. I did it when I returned, but I had talked to, obviously, the team at Captivate, and it was just really cool to see that article there on their website. And there'll be more exciting things coming down the year. But it was just one of those things that I was gone. It's like, hey, it's not the end of the world. A lot of times I talk to podcasters who feel like they cannot go away because they feel like things are, great opportunities are gonna kind of pass by them, or things may not be secured. I'm in the process of talking to brands and talk about partnerships. And all of them were like, good for you. You're going on a sabbatical. We'll talk when you're back. So if anything from these episode, just know that everything that you're working for, everything that you're working at this moment right now will pay off later down. And just, it doesn't mean that, because you're going down that road and taking a shortcut or taking a break or whatever, things are not going to happen. So don't be afraid to just look at opportunities and say, okay, this will still be here when I come back, or maybe that's an opportunity that we'll talk about later down the year. So it doesn't matter. Now, did I get any sales while I was gone? Not necessarily, but I have not really been promoting as much of my work lately because I'm in the process of changing a few things. So I felt like that was one of the things that I was like, oh, okay. It would have been nice to have some course sales while I was gone, but it didn't happen. One cool thing that happened is that so many of you messaged me and said that you were actually taking the time to go through the whole catalog of content of the podcast. Others messaged me to say that the Summer Spark series was exactly what you needed because you were feeling a little bit of a funk and you were shifting a few things around the podcast. And so these series really help you. So that was lovely to read as I returned. Now let's talk about newsletter open rate. It remained about the same, even though I had been doing that RSS feed, so automatic emails. I forgot to mention that earlier on. So in terms of open rate, click-through rate, it kind of remained the same, so there was minimal impact to it during that period. It was really interesting that a lot of you took the time to rate the podcast, and the engagement on Spotify podcasts also grew. All right, and so let's talk about the podcast itself. How did it perform? It was really interesting and lovely to realize that while I was gone, pretty much in the beginning of August, my podcast entered the top 15 chart in Portugal, where I'm from, and in Sweden. It was great. I found out almost like by accident, and I was just delighted. It was awesome. And just for comparison, basically what I've been tracking roughly is that my podcast in both Sweden and Portugal was not really in the charts before, so that surprised me. But there's a lot of content creators that do take the time, especially in Europe. It kind of obviously depends from country to country, but I definitely know that in those two countries, people take a vacation. So I'm guessing that I got benefited from maybe the major podcasts taking a break. Therefore, I could make a breakthrough on that top 15, which was amazing. Now, the part that surprised me the most was that my podcast downloads increased by 1,200%, 1,200%. And I could not explain it because normally what happens when your podcast is featured on Apple Podcasts or Spotify podcasts is that you have a spike in one episode, or you have a spike in downloads, but it's not really even. So as the regular trends go, some podcast episodes will have higher downloads more than others. And what actually happened is that almost every single episode about the same downloads roughly, which got me starting to get a little suspicious. And what ended up happening is that I got about, and just to talk numbers, because I think it's really important, because everyone always wonders, should my podcast have thousands of downloads for it to be successful? If you haven't, go and check out episode 29, how to determine if your podcast is successful, because I talk about that. Are download numbers the only metric that defines if your podcast is successful? No, unless your only metric for success is having an X amount of downloads. So for me, it doesn't mean anything, but about the number of downloads that I got was almost 5,000. And as an average, I get around 300 per month. And what that means is that I got, that insane amount of downloads. And what I found super suspicious, and I started, maybe thinking this could be bots. There's a lot of articles. Well, I wouldn't say there's a lot, but there's some articles and even a podcast movement. Rob Welsh from Libsyn was talking about what happens when you have a surge in downloads that you cannot really explain, especially if it comes from iTunes and the device being a Windows. So that's exactly what happened on my case. I'm still in the process of analyzing this, but I did look into Apple Podcasts as as a platform because they provide you analytics as well. In case you didn't know, going to your dashboard at Apple Podcasts. I'll have the link directly because it's like Apple Podcasts Connect is not like a regular name. And so basically it didn't really have any of those insane numbers. So I'm reckoning that there's some sort of bot activity there. Still excited. I was so happy. Some of my podcast experts were like, my friends, they were like, your podcast is great. So maybe it just got picked up. I'm like, I don't know. So I'll continue to report on this, but I thought it was really interesting that happened. That's not going to change how I deliver the show. That's not how I'm going to change anything about the podcast. But it definitely made me think a little bit about this because actually I had a few clients in the past tell me that this happened. And I was under the impression there were bots because it was just a one-off. They couldn't explain it. But I'll keep you posted. One of the things that could have contributed to the spike in downloads, the organic one at least, was actually my article to Captivate's community, because now that article is available on their website. I'll put the link as well. below. But it was really interesting to see how I felt as a creator, because while I was gone, I was checking just that the episodes were being published, just in case I messed up. Life happens. And I started seeing those downloads. I'm like, what is going on? This is really odd. And so I kept on monitoring it. So yeah, just it continued throughout the whole month, which is, again, unusual. When you are featured on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, you're not featured for a whole month, maybe for a week. And then you may say, Anna, it's September now. The date of these podcast publishing is, the second week of September. And what has happened? Well, the numbers are starting to come down. So again, I think my theory is bang on. But we're going to see. So on that, there's more questions than answers. But I also want to talk about the books I read, because a few of you messaged me to say, hey, are you going to take the time to be learning anything? Because again, you can do 3 types of sabbaticals. I'm sure there's more, but one where you do literally nothing at all. One is where you go and delve and learn about one thing specifically. So basically, if you are an academic, you can go and research something. Or if you're an entrepreneur, you take time off and you just upskill. Right? You can do a hybrid, which is what I did. I took time to upskill and just learned books. I just read books. One of them called The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. So basically talking about how your habits compound in order to make growth, and how, progress is made out of little actions. Another book that I read was also The Artist's Way. And I'll put the links below. I'm still reading that one, and it's been great, and I'm really excited to see, because it just talks about how creativity and great ideas come from, again, also kind of like practicing. It's almost like funny, because I picked the 2 books not being sure and not being aware that they kind of like go so intertwined. So that was really interesting. The other thing that I did was to actually book time with podcast people that live in Europe. So in case you didn't know, I lived in London for a few years. And so I got to catch up with a few friends, and got to meet a few Instagram friends in real life. Nick Redman, who wrote On the Mic. I also had 2 podcast episodes with her, which I will include the show notes in. I completely forgot to check that episode number, but definitely check those out. She's incredible. She's a voiceover coach, and she teaches so many great things about how to sound like the real you in podcasting, because she's an award-winning podcaster too. So she knows a thing or two about it. Now, finally, what are the habits that I'm going to stick with from my sabbatical? Well, definitely 1, I removed a few social media apps from my phone, and I limited the time that I was spending on apps that are like, time sucking, like Instagram and things like that. Removed LinkedIn too from my phone. I was just like opening it for muscle memory. I was like, this is insane. Let's take it off. Funny enough, this podcast episode, I'm recording it because there was an issue with my app. I did an Instagram live to talk about exactly the sabbatical, and I was kind of planning on using it for this week's episode. Ended up not working. The app kind of crashed, so I couldn't really download the file. It is what it is, but I was trying to be intentional and do less work for myself, and here I am creating content anyway. So that's definitely something that I thought it was really interesting. Definitely will be doubling the amount of time that I'm dedicating to the business. Some takeaways from the books. Definitely, I was like, what could happen if I dedicate just more time working on the business versus in the business? I can never know which one it is. But just dedicating more time to implementing more automation, especially using more AI, even more than I'm using it right now, to reduce the amount of time that I'm doing things. And lastly, I'm going to be doing a lot of more batching content for social media as well. And just to plan a bit more ahead. I do have a lot of the topics picked out already, but just kind of recording them ahead of time and making more room for other stuff. So how about you? Are you going to be taking a sabbatical? Were you inspired, worried, or how do you feel after listening to all of this? Hopefully you listen all the way through, because, definitely think it's worthwhile sharing the experience, but also a realistic experience. I didn't say, but I was traveling around Europe, so France, England, and Ireland. And so I had a great time. Basically, I'm just like, ooh, my brain is adapting to being back in the office and, well, quote unquote, my office. That can be anywhere. But just like there's a lot of adaptation that comes from it. So super curious to hear about you. Have you felt more compelled? Because a few of you told me that you were thinking about taking a sabbatical. So I hope I answered, all the questions, or at least most of the questions about it, and that you feel like you are going to be able to take a sabbatical and decide which one is best for your own situation. You can always tag me on social media, obviously at the Podcast Space. I'm on Instagram, mainly on LinkedIn too, but Instagram is where we definitely have more fun, right? So if you listen to all of this and also you're thinking, I actually need help, Anna, you can hire me. Find the link below to figure out exactly how we can work together to plan your strategy, to avoid overwhelm, to avoid content creator burnout, so that you feel excited to be working on your podcast. Or if you decide to take a break, what is the best way to do it so that you don't disappear and then have to rebuild your audience from the ground up? Now it's time for you to create content that is imperfect but moves you forward. And I'll see you on the next episode.